This book was released at the perfect time, just as me and many other fans are getting back into the prequel headspace for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. While I've been enjoying the High Republic novels a lot, there's something refreshing about going back to a familiar time period like the Clone Wars. While the story dragged at some points, and it felt like a few scenes kept repeating every couple chapters or so, I had an amazing time reading this novel. The characters really shine throughout everything, and the stakes and scale of the story were clearly defined throughout the book. Everything is generally focused on Cato Neimodia, but the implications of Obi-Wan's investigation have the potential to throw the entire galaxy into chaos, or end the Clone Wars before it gets out of hand. It didn't have the same emotional touch that some other Star Wars novels have had, but the exciting action and interesting story were more than enough to keep me hooked on the book. Because it takes place at the very beginning of the Clone Wars, this book has the unique opportunity to be able to flesh out the characters and the galaxy following Geonosis and the events that unravel afterward deeper than any comic has before. We get to see how the Jedi and the Republic as a whole responded to the brand new clone army, and how the war quickly expanded and threatened to become out of control. The first stage of the story does a very good job of describing the state of the galaxy, both on a political level and on an emotional level. There was never a detail or explanation that made me stop and think, that doesn't make any sense. I was satisfied with every explanation that Chen had to offer, like why no one took the time to question the clone army that came out of nowhere, why the Jedi Order was quickly integrated into the military and began to lose their way, and how the war forced younger Jedi to adapt and be forced into combat quicker than they should have been. Having main characters that were going through these experiences was a large reason why the world building succeeded so well in my eyes. We get to see a youngling who gets sick just from the thought of violence and death that the war brings, and how she struggles to deal with the Jedi's changing role in the Republic. Anakin is officially knighted to begin the novel, the first time we've seen it in canon, believe, and with it comes a lot of new ground to cover with his and Obi-Wan's relationship. When we see them in the Clone Wars series, they are already brothers on the battlefield, having stripped away the master and apprentice roles. But in Brotherhood, we get to see the changes in both characters' mindsets and relationships. Now a Jedi Knight, Anakin has much more freedom to do as he pleases. And coming right off of a secret marriage on Naboo with Padme Amidala, he takes full advantage of it, sneaking off in the middle of the night on adventures that add more life to the lower levels of Coruscant. Many things that I didn't even think were necessary to add more detail to were done in such a captivating fashion. Qui-Gon makes a comment in The Phantom Menace about how the Neimoidians are all cowards, but a major part of this book is to give more attention and context to the people of Cato Neimodia. A reoccurring matter in the novel is how the Neimoidian people are too often associated with the Trade Federation, specifically the extremist Nute Gunray, who associates himself with the separatist movement. Some in the Republic, like Anakin, think of the Neimoidian people in just as bad of a light as Gunray, even though it's unfair and prejudiced, while the Republic government as a whole only views the planet as an economic culture, unable to separate the artistic and beautiful culture of Cato Neimodia from the business of the Trade Federation. This deep dive into the Neimoidian culture from 4 different perspectives: Obi-Wan, who has his preconceived notions but is willing to listen; Anakin, who lets his emotions be influenced by his experiences with Gunray; Keter, a Neimoidian native who has had bad experiences with the Republic; and Roog, also a Neimoidian native, but much calmer and honest about her and her people's culture, all deepen the reader's understanding of the species and culture, while also dealing with the very real problems of prejudice and generalization. Chen has talked about his skills in character writing, and it absolutely shows in this novel. There's a balanced mix of new and familiar characters, but neither side gets the short end of the stick. We see Anakin and Obi-Wan from a different angle in this story, as they are now equals rather than master and apprentice, and the thoughtful insights on both ends was always interesting to read and develop the characters beyond what we already knew. There are moments in the Clone Wars series that give us a hint of their different relationship now that Anakin is a Jedi Knight, but there was never anything on this level. Now that Obi-Wan sits on the council and is no longer teaching an apprentice, he often reflects on how he did and what Qui-Gon had in mind when he brought the two of them together back on Tatooine all those years ago. Even the brand new or less familiar characters in this novel were developed expertly throughout the story. Mill, a Jedi youngling with a very similar mindset as Anakin, and Roog, a Neimoidian guard, ended up being my favorite parts of reading this book. Whenever a chapter was going to be from their point of view, I instantly got excited to read on. Both characters have unique mentalities and ideologies that made them feel unlike any other character that I've read or seen on screen. Getting into their heads always fleshed out the character even more, even when I thought I knew everything there was about them. Even the villains of the story, like Kitar, a Neimoidian guard as well, are crafted in compelling ways. His journey from a confused and grieving person into a violent extremist made sense every step of the way, but still never felt predictable. Even at the end of the novel, after the character had done horrible things, I still found myself feeling bad for him because of what he went through. Ventress, even though she wasn't used like I was expecting, was able to twist the minds of those around her to impede Obi-Wan's investigation and dissuade the opinions of Neimoidian people. For most of the book, none of the characters realize who she really is, but I was constantly waiting for her to break out her red lightsabers and duel with the Jedi. When it finally happened, the fight was a little hard at times to follow, but the stakes were set from the very beginning and added a lot of tension to the end of the story. It'll be interesting to re-watch the Clone Wars and see her interactions with Anakin and Obi-Wan from a different perspective, now after reading about the first time Ventress met both of them. One of my favorite things about this novel was the reoccurring theme of the Sun Dragon and how it represented Anakin's journey throughout his life. I could instantly tell from the first moment that the story was mentioned that the myth was a central part of who Anakin saw in himself, and it was always a positive memory of his mother that he could go back to even after her death. It relates back to their final conversation before Anakin left Tatooine as a child, telling him to listen to his heart. This myth about a powerful sun dragon that lives inside a star, protecting everything it cares about, with a heart strong enough to survive the star's inferno, is how Anakin justifies his strong emotions despite being a Jedi. The story's message is that one's heart will lead them. It affirms Anakin's belief that his strength lies in the fact that he cares about people, and it's what allows him to protect and save those in the galaxy that he vowed to do when he became a Jedi. One of my favorite scenes in this entire book was when Anakin passed this down to the youngling Mill. It showed the strong connection that the two of them had developed in such a short time, as well as how similar Mill was to Anakin. Her compassion and hate of violence is what brought her to Anakin's attention to begin with, and after saving Obi-Wan together, he trusts her with a story from his mother, a story that he had never even told Obi-Wan after all of their years together. The Sun Dragon myth also mentioned that just as the star that the dragon resides in burns bright, it could also be easily snuffed out, becoming cold and icy, representing the edge that Anakin lives on much of his life, and how it is ultimately his compassion and love that drives him to the dark side. Balance, especially that between Anakin and Obi-Wan, was also a popular theme throughout the novel, with the main part of the story being Obi-Wan all alone on Cato Neimodia, separated from the Jedi and the Republic. He and Anakin begin to realize how important they are to each other, despite the arguments and chaos that always seem to follow them. Obi-Wan's nature, as both a person and a warrior, balance out Anakin. It is discussed multiple times how even though the two of them don't always get along, Obi-Wan's slow and rational thinking and Anakin's brash behavior paired together is often what gets them through problems. Now that there is no longer a power dynamic between the two of them, and they are equals within the Order, they begin to see each other differently, and their mindsets adapt and improve as the story progresses. This book was full of different references and Easter eggs from all across the Star Wars galaxy, but it never felt like it was Chen's main focus when creating the story. Not once did a familiar character showing up or the mention of a past event overshadow what was going on with our characters. A good example of this is with Dexter Jettster. He's a popular character among fans, and it would be easy to have him keep reappearing in the story just as fan service. But Dex's appearance never felt forced, and it always served a purpose to what Obi-Wan and Anakin were doing. There wasn't much, but the backstory between Obi-Wan and Dex that we did get helped fill in the gaps and add more details about how they knew each other. The information adds more weight and detail to the diner scene in Attack of the Clones now that they seem like actual friends with a history, rather than an alien making his first appearance and seeming overly friendly. I already mentioned the connection to Dex, but the book did a great job of including bits and pieces from all across Star Wars lore, including the prequels, books and comics set during the era, and even a few mentions that come from Legends. Some of my favorites were the mentions of Siri Tachi and Satine Kryze, Obi-Wan's two love interests from his early life, and the 2D Clone Wars series, as well as familiar Jedi being mentioned once in a while, like Quinlan Vos or Coleman Trebor. Brotherhood is the perfect book for any fan of the Clone Wars. It turns one throwaway line in Revenge of the Sith into a thrilling investigation that could very well decide the fate of the galaxy. The story has a wide variety of characters fit for any reader, and we see Anakin and Obi-Wan grow into the Jedi that they are when the Clone Wars series begins. I would probably most relate this novel to Bloodline by Claudia Gray, except instead of the political conflict within the New Republic Senate, the Jedi Order and the Clone Wars are the main driving forces behind the story. The novel heavily ties into all aspects of the prequel trilogy, and since it takes place right after Geonosis, it dives heavily into how the Jedi begin to lose their way. Brotherhood by Mike Chen details the early stages of the Clone Wars while developing enjoyable stories and characters that can be read on both the surface and on a deeper level, earning a rating of 9 out of 10. Let me know what you thought of Brotherhood and what rating you would give it in the comments below. Please consider liking the video and subscribe for more in-depth reviews like this, as well as up-to-date news stories, Star Wars lore, gaming videos, and more. As always, thank you all for watching, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.